And I think we can get started this morning. I know that Commissioner Howerton is not able to attend today. And Mark Anthony and Charlie, I'm totally blanking out. Who's the other city member?
Councilmember Caballero, isn't it?
Oh, right, Javier, right, okay. All right, well, I'm sure she'll be joining us soon. Well, welcome everyone to the December 1st.
She's here, Madam Chair.
December 1st. How did that happen?
Here. Okay.
Oh, she's here, great, awesome. So welcome everyone to our December 1st, 2021 meeting. It's hard to believe that we are in the final month of 2021. And hope everyone had a good Thanksgiving holiday. I'm calling this meeting to order, and I would request a roll call vote or just a roll call. And then I'm going to request an excused absence for Commissioner Howerton.
Chair Jacobs, if I would, I'd like to just briefly introduce Terry Elliott to you all. She will be providing clerking for the JCCPC from this point forward. Terry has been with us for quite a number of years and handled a lot of the other boards. So with Susan's retirement, Terry is sliding over to assist us with JCCPC. So I just wanted to introduce her, a new face that you'll be seeing, and hand it over to her to take the role.
Okay, Chair Jacobs. Vice
Here,
Chair.
and welcome, Terry.
Thank you. Vice Chair Middleton.
Welcome, Terry, and I'm here.
Thank you. Commissioner Howerton. Okay, Commissioner Reese. Councilmember Reese.
Yeah, I didn't need that promotion. Here and welcome aboard.
Okay, and Councilmember Caballero.
Here. Nice to have you, Terry.
Thank you. Commissioner Burns.
Here and welcome aboard.
Thank you. Planning Commissioner Amadelia.
Here, welcome.
Thank you. Okay, that's it.
Thank you, Terry. And I'd like to request an excused absence for Commissioner Howerton.
I'll offer that motion.
Second.
Okay, moved by Mark Anthony, seconded by Javiera. And if we could have a roll call vote on that as well, please.
Okay, Chair Jacobs.
Yes.
Vice Chair Middleton.
I vote aye.
Commissioner Howerton. Oh, that's the one we're excusing, right? Councilmember Reese.
Aye.
Councilmember Caballero.
Aye.
Commissioner Burns.
Aye.
Planning Commissioner Amadelia.
Aye.
The motion passes 6-0.
Thank you so much. Do we have any adjustments to the agenda today? Sarah?
I've just got one, which is a request for a brief informal discussion at the end of our meeting regarding Board and Commission annual reports. So if you all are amenable, I'd like to chat with you all about the future of those.
Will do. Thank you, Sarah. Okay, any announcements? Okay, and hearing none, we'll move on to number 5, approval of the minutes from our October 6th, 2021 meeting. Do we have a
I move
motion?
we approve the minutes, Madam Chair.
Okay.
So moved by Commissioner Burns, seconded by Planning Commissioner Amadelia. And a roll call vote, please. Terry?
Chair Jacobs.
Aye.
Vice Chair Middleton.
I vote aye.
Councilmember Reese,
Aye.
Councilmember Caballero.
Aye.
Commissioner Burns,
Aye.
Planning Commissioner Amadelia.
Aye.
Motion passes 4-0.
I think it's probably more than 4. Was that 6 of us?
6-0, I'm sorry.
Okay,
Yep.
thank you. Thank
I'm
you so
sorry.
much. That's okay. Okay, city and county managers priority items.
Nothing from the county.
Sorry, Brian.
Oh, no problem.
Don, did you have anything?
There are no city priority items.
Okay, great. Thank you, Brian and Don. And number 7, we have our comprehensive plan update with Lisa Miller.
Good morning,
Thank you.
everyone.
Morning.
All right. Just wait a moment for the slides to come up. Okay. All right, good morning. I'm Lisa Miller. I'm part of the Durham City County Planning Department team that's been working on the comprehensive plan. Next slide. We'd just like to share an update with you all as we do each of your meetings. Particularly, we wanted to share some information around how our current community engagement is going and talk some about our ongoing and upcoming work to develop new policies and place type map for the new plan. We kind of always remind you all, not that any of us need a reminder, but in general, we're seeking guidance on the plan work, but also as a reminder, because of COVID and all of the uncertainty that that brings, that continues to potentially impact our ability to do equitable engagement that we know takes additional time and resources while our residents are dealing with the impacts of COVID. So just want to continue to highlight that. In addition, today we're particularly interested in hearing your feedback on the draft place type map that's been publicized for engagement with the community now through the end of January. Next slide. So at your last meeting, we shared information with you all about what we were planning to do for engagement this fall. So this morning we've got some updates for you about how that's going. That engagement phase really began with collaboration with our contractor, Ideal Ortiz, and our engagement ambassadors recruited for this phase to determine how we engage residents on the place type map and to develop the materials for engagement. And that work began back in September. In October, we publicized a series of community meetings and invited residents to join one of these meetings as an opportunity to learn more about the new comprehensive plan, some background on the process so far, as well as how to use the engagement tools that are available this fall and through January. We have hosted 2 of those so far. The second of those meetings was last night. We've had between 20 and 30 folks attend each of those and have gotten some really great feedback from folks so far. We've also we finalized materials and provided them to the engagement ambassadors to start engaging members of their community in around the future of how land is used in their neighborhoods. And we've created 2 introductory videos for use in our community meetings, as well as for community members to review or use in engaging their neighbors. One of those is focused on helping folks understand what the different pieces of the new comprehensive plan will be. And one that's walking folks through using the interactive web GIS map, the place type map, to add comments and input on the draft map. We are working on finalizing the Spanish version of both of those videos as well. We are starting to see resident input pop up on the map. That's something that as folks add their comments and their perspectives, everyone can see not who is sharing that information, but what others in the community are having to say. So that's been great to see. And that is, the map is something that Scott will be walking through in more detail later on in this presentation this morning. We'd love your help in bringing this engagement opportunity around the map to the attention of folks that each of you are connected to in the community. And finally, our outreach team and policy working group members have also been helping invite their friends and neighbors to engage on the map as well. We also wanted to provide an update on the policy working groups. As we are engaging residents on the draft map this fall and winter, these groups are working towards draft policy recommendations for the new plan. These policies will be the focus of community engagement in the spring of next year. Since the August kickoff meeting of this group, we've held another meeting with all of the groups together on October 27th. And each of the 6 individual policy, or 5 of the 6 policy working groups have met in November, and all will be meeting in December. We had 1 rescheduled. The focus of the October meeting for all of the policy working group members was working to bring young people into these groups and working with the Office on Youth to develop community agreements that help create safe space for young people and adults, community members, and staff to work together. And each working group is began their November meeting by finalizing and adopting community agreements that came out of that discussion in October. I just wanted to highlight, we are extremely grateful to the Office on Youth staff, Laura, Elise, Nori, Jamie, and Jalen, as well as the Changed by Youth ambassadors who are plugged into this work. They've been extremely helpful. The remainder of the November meetings of each working group and the majority of their December meetings are focused on brainstorming policy ideas that help us work towards the community goals and objectives that have been adopted for the plan. Once these groups have generated those policy ideas, staff will be working on creating fuller draft policy statements from those ideas, looking across the topics that each group is looking at to see how the policy ideas can be better linked together. Then those policy statements will be brought back to the working groups in the first part of next year to be further iterated to create draft policies that will be brought out for community engagement in April of next year. Bringing together a mix of residents and staff in these groups has had some challenges, particularly trying to do so effective virtually, but it's been really impactful to hear residents' perspectives and ideas around policy. We're focused on ensuring that resident perspectives and ideas are reflected in our draft policies. We're also trying to build resident understanding on the different topics related to the comprehensive plan and to build staff understanding of resident experiences and perspectives. And we are really excited to be doing this work together. And with that, I'm going to hand things off to Scott to talk more about the map.
Thanks, Lisa. So what we'd like to do is, well, as Lisa mentioned, we're going to dive into taking a look at the draft place type map, which I know is one of the more exciting parts of the new comprehensive plan. Just as a reminder, for this comprehensive plan, we are using place types instead of the traditional future land use categories that we used in our previous comprehensive plan. These place types are assigned to all parcels in Durham County and are designed to be more descriptive in how with the vision of how areas will look in the future, including land use, housing mix, mobility, and green space. These will be used in conjunction with our 3-part growth management strategy, which includes the urban growth boundary. That is a line that we are proposing to where city or public water and sewer would not be extended to protect those areas for rural purposes or to protect environmental resources. This is would replace what is now the suburban rural tier boundary in the comprehensive plan. We also have our future growth areas, which are generally found adjacent to the urban growth boundary and are places that could see significant changes in the future if we as a community decide to add water, sewer, or fire service to those areas in the future. However, they are not currently served by urban services. And then lastly, we have the 15-minute communities concept, which includes complete neighborhoods where residents can access their daily needs by foot, bike, or transit ride within a 15-minute trip. We want to ensure that when new places are built, particularly on the suburban fringe, that this concept is kept in mind. We build complete communities from scratch, but also we need to keep in mind that there are existing communities where there's little or no options for accessing these daily needs, and we need to use the place type map as a way to create incremental change in those neighborhoods to help develop 15-minute communities. Next slide. So just as a refresher from last time, we have 20 draft place types that are identified in the map. There is a detailed place type guide, which is also available to describe in detail what each of these means. We also have on the legend of the map a one-pager that each person can click on to get a general summary of what each of those are. Next slide, Brooke. So here's a snapshot of what the place type map looks like. Brooke, if you would, I'll stop sharing your screen and then I'll start sharing mine and we'll take a look at the actual online web map. And I'll take a look at we can take a look at a few sample areas, and we're happy to zoom in to anything else that you all might be interested in seeing. Can everyone see my screen okay? All right. So here we have the very first draft of the place type map. We have it available for, as Lisa was mentioning, it has an option to provide comments, which are these little teal dots that you see on there. We want to thank the folks in City County GIS for helping us develop a platform that is it's relatively easy to use and provides an option for feedback, which is particularly important in these COVID times when we can't do a lot of in-person engagement. So just a little bit of orientation. So this thin brown line that's on the edge is the urban growth boundary. This corresponds pretty closely to where the current suburban rural tier boundary is. Just a few key highlights to point out. We have areas up in the very northeast part of Durham and kind of the far northeast, north of I-85, which are areas that are, a lot of which are in the Falls Lake critical area and are particularly hard to serve with sewer, that we've recommended pulling the urban growth boundary back. We have a few other areas, particularly based on some feedback from the city administration. We have removed all areas from the urban growth area that are urban growth boundary in Orange County, except for those that are already in the city. We've changed it to reflect all of our annexation agreements with our neighboring communities. We have a few places, particularly in Northwest Durham, where the current boundary doesn't particularly line up well with the watershed boundary or topography, so it has been cleaned up to reflect that. And then one area I want to highlight in particular, which may warrant a little more discussion, we have the Arrowhead area in West Durham. This was an area that was placed in the rural tier with the last comprehensive plan purely as a policy choice. It is an area that could be served relatively easily with water, sewer, and fire service. However, you all as the decision makers could also still elect to leave that as a outside the urban growth boundary if you so choose. So these other areas, which kind of the faded color with the thick black line, are the future growth areas. As we discussed earlier, we have the one in Southeast Durham, which would require a new fire station to serve. We have similar ones that are all tend to be on the edge of the urban growth boundary, which all are either areas that would need a new fire station or would need significant new sewer infrastructure. We use those two as our kind of baseline to identify these areas because those are the two critical public services that require that are based on a certain geography. Other things, it will still help benefit growth management and kind of managing our public services like trash, police, EMS, whenever we are doing an effective job of growth management. So our first sample to look at the draft place type map. Here's an area out in, this is Rougemont, out in the rural part of the county. We have the central area of Rougemont, what we designate as rural village, which is the commercial designation for the rural areas. The kind of traditional residential part of Rougemont is designated as established residential. That's where we have, particularly for the rural tier, where there's lots on smaller, where there's houses on smaller lots. The bulk of the area, this darker green, is the rural and agricultural reserve. These are the areas where we would anticipate larger lots and using zoning to encourage rural preservation. We also have one of our 2 active quarries in the county over here, which is designated as resource extraction. I will note that the commercial and established residential in Rougemont are based on the Rougemont plan that was adopted by the county commissioners a few years ago. It's one of our more recent planning activities. So to take a look at another area, we'll go to the sorry, I hope I'm not making anyone nauseous with my scrolling. This is the Old West Durham, kind of West Hillsborough Road area. So you can see the kind of the residential area of Old West Durham is designated as established residential, is mostly already developed with residential uses on small lots. There aren't very many infill sites in neighborhoods like Old West Durham. For the first draft of the map, we are showing all of the existing compact neighborhoods as transit opportunity areas, since those are all area, even though light rail is no longer with us, these are areas that are still served by good transit service and are good opportunities for higher density transit oriented development. We have you can see the Duke campus is designated as institutional campus. And just another say, similar to Old West Durham, we have the Crest Street area, which is designated as established residential, except for the existing multifamily properties, which are shown as apartment and townhouse. So we'll look at one last area. So this is an interesting area that's kind of in the Merrick Moore community along East Gear Street. This is another area where there's a lot of existing residential development on smaller lots, which are shown as established residential. This area does have some larger sites, one of which I know the city council is very familiar with because you had a zoning change in that area. These are larger infill sites that are recommended for mixed residential, where they're based on the goals and objectives, where there would be a mix of residential housing types. One important thing to note is this East Gear Street corridor up to the Glen School Road Walmart is one of our most frequent transit corridors on the Go Durham system. And it's relatively underdeveloped along this corridor. We currently have a mix of low density residential, commercial, and industrial along the East Gear Street. So we've recommended a mixture of apartment and townhouse, transit opportunity area, and neighborhood services. Recommending established residential where there is already established residential. One thing, it's a little hard to see, but one of the things that we're also recommending, kind of based on the goals and objectives for folks, we're really interested in having commercial services closer to where they live, which is kind of an opposite policy direction of our current comprehensive plan. we have some legacy small commercial areas throughout the city that are currently zoned residential that we're recommending as neighborhood services areas. So there's a small old store here at the corner of East Gear and Watson that's shown as neighborhood services. So that is a very brief introduction to the place type map. We'd be happy to answer more questions or show you different areas when we're done. I'm going to switch back to the PowerPoint and we'll quickly finish up the presentation, and then we can go back to the map if anyone has any questions. So just in closing, we wanted to share that this is our simplified timeline that we've shown you the last several times, just to remind you all where we are in the process related to the different plan sections. We finished up the community goals and objectives adoption process this summer, and we completed the recommendations for the Southeast Durham focus area early in the fall. We do have Bragtown residents involved in the policy working groups and continue to be in conversation with them around their neighborhood needs and the comprehensive plan work. We're simultaneously working on developing policies while engaging residents on the draft place types and map. And as always, we're continuing to learn and improve the process as we go along, as this is an iterative process and we are innovating on the fly. So just again, what we're as always, we're seeking general guidance from the JCCPC on how we're going about our work and any changes or feedback you have. And we're particularly looking for any specific feedback you have on the place type map, since that is our biggest work product at the moment. So that I'd be happy to answer any questions, and Lisa will as well.
Thank you so much, Scott and Lisa, and we really appreciate how you all have kept us so well informed at each of our meetings, and to watch how this whole process is evolving. I have some comments and questions, but I will hold mine and let the rest of the Joint City County Planning Commission share their thoughts first. Any feedback, questions, concerns? I think we're specifically being asked to give any feedback related to the place type map today. And if I'm missing you, please speak up if I don't see your hand. Okay, Austin, go for it.
Thank you. This is really great work. I appreciate always how hard the planning staff has been working on the comp plan. I guess I have a very maybe overly basic question about the place type map. So right now we have the future land use map that it's very outdated, and we're commonly amending it when we see rezonings. And my, I guess, hope would be that we're not continuing to do that with a place type map. And so I'm curious from staff's perspective, like how y'all are envisioning the use of this moving forward. Are we going to be seeing it as very relevant during rezonings? How is it going to be used more at a staff level? Or yeah, I'm just curious, like initial guidance on the use of the place type map as it relates to our side of things. And also, I guess the ongoing question we've had throughout this process is how do we start, how does this relate to us right now as we're working in this kind of interesting in between?
That's a great question, Commissioner Amendolia. So we do fully expect that the place type map will be used like the future land use map is now to provide guidance on zoning changes. And you all in the Planning Commission are one of our primary customers of using the future land use map. It's our expectation, because that this one will be new, that we would expect many fewer requests for amendments than we are now. Like you said, the current one is kind of out of date and doesn't really reflect a lot of the current community priorities, particularly when it comes to residential development. So with that being said, we can't fully predict the future. If we did, we'd probably be in a different business. So we would expect there needs to be some amendments, and so that's as part of the policy development. We need to provide some guidance on when to amend, and there are always different levels of amendments where there are minor changes on the edge of something, or as opposed to kind of big changes from one place type to a completely different one, where we probably require different guidance. Although I hate to give credit to Raleigh, their comprehensive plan has some really good guidance on how to do plan amendments that we might borrow a little bit from.
That's helpful. When in the process do you think that you'll start developing those kind of policy guidelines? Are those already underway?
Yeah, so we're at the very beginning stages through our policy working groups. Our schedule is to have draft policies for community input for the next round of engagement in the spring. So that's a roughly April-ish.
And so those will include like guidance on amending the place type map. And
yeah, we can definitely work to have those available by then.
okay. That's helpful. And then I'm curious how, I imagine that somebody could use this map and go and say, oh, this is where I live, and start looking and say, why are there no neighborhood services near my apartment, or whatever thing that they wish they were seeing closer to their place. I'm curious how y'all plan to incorporate feedback on that, and what the community engagement looks like on that front, because it's a very granular conversation, and Durham's a large place, and so obviously we can't do that for every square foot, nor do I think we maybe should. But like, what do y'all see as the process for community engagement on that? Does that happen through rezonings over time? And I guess part of my perspective on this comes from the fact that we often have folks come to meetings saying, hey, the future land use map said da da da, and why is it now being changed? And so I think, to me, it's important to like state from the beginning, like, what is the purpose of this? Is it saying this is what Durham's going to look like in 2040, or this is a map that we're using as a conversation topic, and it's going to be an ongoing conversation throughout the next 20, 30 years?
I can share a little bit about that, kind of how we've been framing this as we're talking to residents. And I think we've heard from residents, from you all, and know ourselves that it's really important for folks to understand what this map and what this plan can do and what it can't do, both for the map on its own and the kind of extent that the map and policies together can influence what's physically in our community. So we have been working on making sure that we're clearly letting folks know that this is a guiding document, a vision that we're working towards, that you all, our planning commission, our elected officials, as you're reviewing development cases, as we're tackling things kind of in our work program as a planning department, these are the things that we're saying that we want to be working towards, and that they are not law, and making sure to give a little bit of understanding. We've been trying to work on language around what zoning is, what by right development is through the site plan process, to try and provide a little bit more education around some of those terms that we've historically done not a great job of making accessible to residents. So then talking about the ways that the map that we're putting together and the policies could work hand in hand to encourage the kinds of neighborhood services that we're looking for that would help residents have access to the things that they need. So that's kind of how we've been trying to frame it as we're talking with residents.
It's really helpful. And I guess the last kind of comment I would make on this is because there's an interesting nuance in communicating that this is going to change over time. And it's us continuing to create a vision and also conveying to residents that this is something we're actually going to do. Because I've also, sometimes when we talk about like, oh, this isn't law, I feel concerned that residents would think, okay, well then this doesn't matter, which is also not true. So yeah, I appreciate the nuance for all swimming in, and yeah, I hope we continue to sit with that both and. That's all the comments I have at this time. Thanks, Chair.
Great questions and comments. Austin, I think you've hit on a lot of the complexity of navigating this conversation and this work that our great staff has to go through. So thank you. Anyone else? Okay, so I guess I just started to dive a little bit into the map itself this morning, and I do want to spend a lot more time with it. I guess one of my concerns is that we make sure we have enough time for this to really get out into the community. I think, Scott, you mentioned we're going to be waiting, or this is open for feedback till the end of January. Is that correct? I just want to put it out there that we may need more time on that, just because, we are kind of heading into the holidays, and I appreciate that you all are having all of these different meetings. I just signed up for one, and I do encourage all of us to do that, because I think Austin alluded to this, is that when people finally really get wind of this, like me, they're going to start looking at, looking at you're going to start looking at your own neighborhood and things like that. And it's fantastic that we have the feature on there where people can leave their comments. But I think that it's just going to probably take time for this to get around and for people to get engaged with it. And there are some important proposed changes on here. I just really want to highlight that. And I'm glad that you all are really pulling out the three really big guiding principles here, which is the urban growth area, the future growth area, the 15-minute communities, and that things like the 15-minute community, that's going to be something very incremental. But I think what's going to be probably most controversial is going to also be those areas that you have highlighted to either be removed right now from the urban growth boundary, or the ones that you're putting in there to be actually taken out. And I think that's going to create a lot of discussion in the community. And I was wondering what your decision-making was related to some of those, especially when I looked at Northern Durham and also the Arrowhead area. What were the things that you looked at? Because, we have the guiding principles and from the comp plan, the goals and objectives. I'm just wondering, is that what you used when you looked at those decisions?
Yeah, Commissioner Jacobs, yeah, we certainly use the goals and objectives for all of our decision making. And I think just in general, for the first draft of this map, we tried to give you all the best objective planning map we could, understanding that there will be lots of other decisions that need to be made in order for the final draft to, when the final version is adopted. So for the areas that we recommended removing from the urban growth area, it was mostly two criteria. One is it in an environmentally sensitive area that, which in most cases is the Falls Lake critical area. There were certain areas that were added to the Falls Lake critical area after some changes in what we understood to be the normal pool level out there. And then it's also the expense and difficulty of serving it, particularly with sewer, which is one of the more difficult utility to provide. So these are areas that are basically, they drain away from the city, so it would require some really expensive sewer infrastructure. We've already had a lot of, the Horton Grove Preserve is that was zoned for a large development at one point, which is why that was in the urban growth area, or what's now the suburban tier. That is now a preserve, so there's not that much land left up there to even serve with sewer. And kind of the similar in the kind of Hamlin Road, Glen Road area. Ellerby Creek Watershed Association has been buying up a lot of land out there, so the land for development, there's not that much land for development out there, and so the idea of building expensive city sewer infrastructure to serve land at 6% impervious surface would just be generally not responsible growth management. So it was a purely objective decision. We were not trying to pick on anyone in particular.
Well, I think it's helpful, similar to what Austin was saying. I think it's helpful for the public to understand, what was behind these recommendations like that, especially those. I think it would be helpful to people to know. I definitely support both of those criteria. I would also say, though, that when I look at something like the Arrowhead area, because I remember I lived in that area when that decision was made, and there were other factors that went into that. For instance, that's one of the only areas left that has farms in the western part of Durham County. So, we also, I think, want to look at what are other, when I said, other parts of our the vision, the objectives and values, if our community feels that having farms accessible to different parts of our community and supporting existing family farms, things like that, that may be a reason why we keep that protected, right? I'm just putting that out there. I personally, that's something that would be personally valuable to me. Like we have the Waller Farm out there. That's a U-Pick farm, and it's across from Forest View. So kids get to go and experience that, that type of thing. So I just hope that we'll be open to other reasons why things we may not want to include them in the urban growth boundary as we go forward. I had a little problem with the colors, and I don't know if you've heard that from anybody else, that on the the index, the colors didn't always line up for me, and I didn't know if that was my device. If you've had any feedback about that.
Yeah, we have had some feedback about that.
Okay.
And we know we did an update yesterday that hopefully fixed it. We'll see.
Okay.
Yes, and it does depend on the device that you're using, but it's not it's not just you, Commissioner Jacobs. So
Okay,
hopefully that would, yeah. So this is a great platform, but it's also the first time we've used it. So we've had a few glitches that we need to fix. So if you hear about anything or you all notice anything, just let us know and we'll try to fix them.
okay,
And
great.
Commissioner Jacobs, we thought you might have some opinions about Arrowhead.
Yes. Yeah, and and I think also some of the areas in the northern part of Durham too. But you know, we will, it's a process for sure. But I'm glad that you all are, and this is, I think, what's so great about the conversation. And I know especially city council members will appreciate this, is that folks understanding, first of all, the importance of protecting our drinking water and our watershed and why Durham has such great water, and wins contests for having the best tasting water, and things like that. But also that, you know, development is expensive, and you know, there's all kinds of studies about how what's cost effective development for cities to undertake, and most development does not pay for itself at all. And so you know, really us looking at, you know, I'm especially excited about the infill and the you know, reimagining things like parking lots and strip development and shopping malls and things. So so I think that's going to be a very sensitive discussion around the urban growth area and future growth areas. Charlie, see your hand up.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner Jacobs. Appreciate it. I just want to thank both you and Chair Amendolia for your remarks. I just wanted to add just a couple of points, mostly just to underline what's already been said. First of all, to thank Lisa and Scott for this incredible work, the level of detail, the level of what you have to carry around in your heads to answer questions from knuckleheads like us about why this particular spot is this way. Forget it. It's amazing. I just wanted to underscore the fact that is going to be really important as this gets rolled out. We're going to need to be able to explain to folks why certain things are designated in certain ways. And I know that y'all, I'm frozen, aren't I? You guys are not moving at all.
We can hear you. We can hear you. Oh, now we can't. Okay, Charlie, we did lose you, but if you come back in, here you go.
Yeah, I realized about halfway through that you guys were frozen, so I'm back now. Sorry. Mostly, I was just saying nice things about the staff and how great y'all are and how smart y'all are to keep all this in your heads. But what I also wanted to say is that it's going to be important for all of us as both policymakers and folks who are deeply involved in this process in the Planning Commission to be able to access some of that stuff, some of those reasons why, as this gets rolled out to the public, because it will cease to be a good enough answer for me to say, oh, I'll just forward this to Lisa and Scott. They'll help you explain why this is a certain way. That's going to get old for y'all, but it's also going to get old for members of the public who email folks like us all the time asking these questions. So I wanted to make sure that that was pegged. The other thing is to follow up on something Austin said near the beginning, which is it's going to be super important for me, at least, and I think my colleagues too, to understand how we are supposed to be using some of these designations. What is the impact of this? A lot of that's going to be covered in your staff reports as we go forward after this is approved and implemented, after we start doing land use cases in the under this new rubric. But I think as we move forward, helping us and kind of educating us about how we are expected to use this tool would be super helpful. The only other thing I wanted to say is that I'm so grateful that we're doing the work at this level of detail. It's really, and with this level of openness and transparency, but I understand that we all have an obligation to help carry that transparency forward to folks in our community who will jump into these tools and make and provide their input. It can't be enough, as y'all well know, for us to open this process and wait for folks to enter into it with their ideas and thoughts and their passion. that's one of the things I've been proudest of about this work up until now, is how not just transparent and open, but also how much outreach we have done to actually get folks engaged in the process. That's going to continue to be important going forward, but it's going to be incumbent on all of us on JCCPC to reach out to our networks, both online and in person, to encourage people to learn more about this process, to learn more about how they can get involved, because it's really by incorporating all of that input that, number one, the plan becomes better from a substantive perspective, but number two, embodies the idea of community engagement going forward, and number three, because of the first two, become a tool that folks accept and appreciate and use going forward, to represent what they want to see in their built environment. So those are all that's all I wanted to add, and just to help, I guess the last thing I would say, help us understand what's most helpful to y'all in terms of trying to encourage people to become involved in the process. What are the and maybe that could take the form of an informal toolkit for those of us who have some social media presence or have frequent contact with members of the community. Where can we direct people to go to if this is something that they have a passion for, to learn more about? That's all I had. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Charlie. Yes, and I do want to commend you all. I noticed in the report that you have put together a toolkit now that, people, anybody, not just the paid community ambassadors, but that anyone can download and use. And I think that's fantastic. Thank you. Councilmember Javiera.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. First of all, this is fantastic. I appreciate the presentation and all the comments that folks have had. I just had a couple of kind of logistical questions. Could folks send us, if there's flyers that we could be promoting of these events so that we can put them out on our own social media as elected officials, and in our own circles? That would be helpful. Secondly, to Councilmember Reese's point, I hope that there's actual formal training for us when these things get rolled out. It's not just like, oh, here's a new tool. When you want people to actually understand the tool, you train them. So I hope that for council members who have to do rezonings, commissioners who also sometimes have to do rezonings, and our planning commission, that there's an actual formal process so that we are not bungling it a lot. I mean, we are going to bungle it because come on. But that we have some support. And I think even considering just along with the engagement process, thinking about doing those kinds of trainings, even for the public itself. We're doing, to Lisa's point around educating our public, getting them more aware of the process. I think that then folks have a better understanding of what the limitations are and then what are also the opportunities. So those are my comments, and I appreciate this great feedback. Thanks.
I can share just quickly that we'd be happy to send the flyers to you all, and also to share, we've been working with the folks in communications in the city and the county to try and share this information on social media, so we can make sure that you have access to kind of how they're sharing that information out on those venues, so that you all can help with that too. That would be fantastic. Thanks.
Thank you. Commissioner Burns.
Yeah, I'll be quick. I was wondering midway through, Lisa, if there's any way, one, thank you for all the information. I have been sharing it on my social media, so I have been getting the posters. Claudia's and Joanne have been doing a great job at sending them out and putting them in the weekly reports for folks. But we all know that, everybody's not always on listservs. Everybody's not on my social media. So to Commissioner Jacobs' point about maybe making this a little bit longer, midway through, do you think, and I don't know if you all are capturing this, maybe the first part of January, if we look and maybe capture demographics and see that we're not getting what we think, maybe also use that as a driver to kick it out a little bit farther, or lean on us so that we might do a harder push at sharing some of the information, if that's helpful. I remember like I think when you all were doing a listening session for the property over at Wheels when the city was, I remember a lot of people actually knew about that one. But this poster, it looks so similar, right? Like it's just a different. So yeah, people say, well, that was last week. I'm like, no, it was not last week. Like that one's this week because it was one last night. So it is just a thought. I know that it seems like we're pushing a lot on outreach, but it's because for both the bodies, it's pretty important. So if we see, I don't know if you all are gathering demographics, but if you are, or maybe even gathering, zip codes. And if you all think, well, you know what, we had 200 people at this one, but we had 3 at this one. Do we need to loop back? So those are just some questions. There are some things that I want to throw out. Thank y'all.
Yeah, I can respond to that. There's a couple of things that we've built into our engagement strategy kind of over the 3 months that we had planned from the get-go. One of those is, I think we've shared with you all in the past when we've had an engagement phase that we have set aside some of our budget to hold incentivized participation in focus group discussions with some of the groups that we're not reaching. So our plan is kind of checking in around who we're hearing from, both in terms of geography as well as kind of demographic identity characteristics, to see who we need to invite into participation in a focus group or multiple focus groups. So that's something that we're kind of starting to keep an eye on, giving a little bit of time for folks to get into and look at before we start going out and doing additional, trying to reach folks. And then another thing that we are looking at as our engagement ambassadors get started with their sessions and conversations with residents, seeing who else we can bring into that work. So we had an initial group of folks that we worked with to figure out kind of how we're asking folks for input around the place type map. And they're getting started. They're doing they're in conversation with their community members, but looking at how we can expand that and bring more people in as engagement ambassadors throughout the next 2 months. So, and we are always open to additional ideas and suggestions around how we can do engagement. We are also super know that it's really important and a huge part of how we make sure that this plan actually reflects our community's needs. And so we always welcome other people's perspectives and expertise on how we can do that better. So please reach out if you have additional ideas.
Thank you, Lisa. And I do want to correct myself. I said Joanne. I meant to say Deborah's been sending out. Deborah's who sends out our email. So I just want to correct that for the record. And thank you so much for all you do. A great job with engagement.
Thank you. And I just have one last quick question was, and I may have missed this, but are you all showing on the future place type map all of the basic watershed features, like where Ellerby Creek is, where New Hope Creek is? When you zoom in, is that something that's visible?
Those are things we don't have on there, but if it's existing data, it could be something we could add.
I mean, personally, I think it's really important for that to be at least visible at some point, because, that's really, the environmental features are the bottom line, and especially our watershed, in terms of a lot of the, when a number of our commission members have brought up, well, what's the underlying reason for why we're doing this or that? And I think that for folks to see, where, the Little River, Lake Mickey, because I know a lot of folks don't sometimes understand why do we have less development in Northern Durham? It may help for folks to understand why things are being designated a certain way or not, based on, in East Durham, because that's, that is the most fundamental thing. So anyway, that was just going to be one of my questions or suggestions, and folks may have others. So If anyone has any further feedback, please email Lisa and Scott. And I look forward to attending a session, and yeah, please send us flyers and we will help be ambassadors ourselves. Thank you so much.
Thank you all.
Okay, next we have Omnibus 17 with Michael Stock.
Thank you very much, Chair Jacobs and other commissioners and city council members. Before you is the next round of omnibus text amendments that I know you all love and rejoice when you see come forward. We do try to bring these forward a little bit more regularly, so the lists don't get obscenely long. You just did process a set of amendments for applications and permits, and you did have an omnibus not too much in the past. So that's why you're seeing this one so soon. We try to move these forward a little bit more rapidly instead of sitting on them. Let me share my screen and go through the presentation a little bit. Oops, share. There we go. Can you all see that? Excellent. Thank you. So again, this is round 17 for the omnibus amendments. No public hearings have been scheduled at this time. We can still, as we go through, continue to review them and receive comments and such, make changes and such. But part of the process is to bring it forward to JCCPC for your review and comment. Oops, let me back up for a second. There we go. There we go. So this is just a general list. The full list obviously is in your agenda packet, but I just wanted to highlight some of the topics that are within this list of changes, such as the planning director to be floodplain administrator, which is a change from the current designation of the building inspector, building inspections director, change to the airport overlay, some changes to uses, accessory uses, temporary uses, some cluster subdivision and infill standard changes, flag lot, yard, small lot option clarifications, some added performance standards for cemeteries, a few changes for environmental protection and project buffer regulations, parking, egress, bike lanes and stub outs, some design district standard changes, and then also there are some from recent legislation that we are implementing changes due to that. Quickly, the floodplain administrator role is currently the building inspections director. We are changing that to the planning director, aka Sarah Young. So she will assume that role. It's not just one person in the city and county who does floodplain administrating. There are multiple staff, both in the city and the county. Stormwater Services has a whole floodplain folks for floodplain review. County engineering has a role in floodplain. Building inspection still has a role because a lot of the regulations are regarding how buildings are built in regulated flood hazard areas and such, but the head floodplain administrator designation will transfer from the inspections director to the planning director. The airport overlay, one change in that is adding a requirement to require an navigation easement to RDU. And yes, it is spelled correctly. I thought it was spelled incorrectly when I saw navigation, and Word tells me it's spelled incorrectly, and I had to look it up. It is the correct spelling, and is basically an easement that RDU has requested for us to incorporate into our ordinance. There's a zoning case that's under consideration now, under review, that's in one of the overlays, and they've requested that easement. The language we did borrow from Morrisville. They already have that in their ordinance. They have some overlay airport overlay zoning also. And it just allows for basically overflight allowances, to be quite brief about it. Uses, basically relocating how research and development is categorized from industrial to office, and to also expand the districts allowed for research and development. Right now, it's still pretty limited to industrial districts and SRP, but there's been a lot of interest in expanding. We have the Duke Innovation District downtown. There's a lot of opportunities for research and development in other non-residential districts, and not just those that have been traditionally industrial. We did correct some redundant definitions for minor and major vehicle services, allowing for attached accessory structures. This is we allow for attached housing types where the property line runs down the middle of two dwelling units. Looks like a duplex, but it's really two dwelling units, one on each lot. There's interest in allowing for attached accessory structures that would straddle a property line. Obviously, both property owners would have to be involved in that and allow for that, but we're allowing for that opportunity, and that was brought to us by the local development community. Domestic chickens, the clarifying maintenance requirements. There's redundant information or requirements in there about sanitary conditions, making it odor free. Really, it's tough to regulate based upon text that says chickens need to be odor free. That's kind of almost impossible to regulate, but we already have regulations in there that require maintaining sanitary conditions, and the city code has its own references for sanitary conditions. So we're just cleaning up those references there, and we're also cleaning up some specific temporary uses regarding temporary structures, construction structures, and sales and leasing offices. We actually had a recent request for a temporary, I believe, lab for Duke Regional. They're doing some construction on their site, and there wasn't really a specific temporary use that could accommodate that. They could do a temporary use, but it was very limiting. So we realized that there were some clarifications that we can make within the existing temporary uses to help with that. And not just that, it would help with a lot of other instances too. I highlight this as Article 6 because there's just a couple different topics under this article. We're just clarifying the reporting requirements for the affordable housing bonus. It's still in that section. It still references a yearly reporting requirement. Those reporting requirements are built into the actual definition of an affordable housing dwelling unit. And there's a lot of times that affordable housing dwelling units are sale and not leased. So we just remove that requirement. There are adopted procedures from the Community Development Department for the maintenance and compliance standards for affordable housing. Allowing cluster subdivision lots along a proposed perimeter alley and with certain conditions. There was a suggestion from the local development community to allow that opportunity, especially in the urban tier. We felt that was a reasonable request. And then we also made some changes to the infill standards to allow more flexibility for street yard options when there really isn't a context area that applies to those small infill lots. And also a little more flexibility with street yards. Did some more clarification. Did some clarification for yards in general and for flag lots. Flag lots in particular, sometimes you have the buildable portion of a flag lot is the quote unquote flag portion of the flag lot. The pole portion is usually where the driveway is, if you can imagine that. And sometimes, especially with rear yards, the traditional rear yard isn't always the best place to be behind or the back end of that lot. Sometimes the shape of that lot winds up being a narrower building envelope where the rear yard works better to the side or opposite that pole. So we are proposing language for that, and that also just to make it explicit that you can do the small lot option for flag lots. Also, that was already allowed, but there's been a lot of discussion. Does it say that? Where does it say that? So we're just making it explicit. Further with the small lot option, clarifying that you can do lot averaging for small lots, and that it's already allowed for standard lots, and it just allows for change of lot. If you're doing a small lot option subdivision, for example, you can you can go below the threshold for at most 15%. It just allows for a lot of variety, and the overall average has to still be at what the minimum lot size has to be. There was also a call for clarifying that the maximum floor area for small lots, and as you recall, the maximum floor area is 1,200 square feet if you do a small lot. But there are opportunities to do kind of walkout basements where the slope grades away or down from the street, and it really doesn't create a street presence. So there was requests to exempt that area, and we thought that was a reasonable request. And then also just for clarification for apartments and multiplexes for their descriptions. Those were kind of more technical in nature. Cemeteries, I mentioned this earlier. We added language about just making sure we were being explicit that cemeteries you needed to comply with local, state, and federal laws regarding cemeteries, how you want to move them or modify them or establish them and such. New requirements to require field survey for development sites abutting or containing a cemetery. I think we know that we have lots of small family cemeteries out there. We have a lot of undocumented cemeteries or partially documented cemeteries. And if there is one that is at least somewhat documented on or adjacent to the site, we need to have better survey information. And then also maintaining access to existing cemeteries.
Michael, can I ask a quick question here?
Absolutely.
Can you go back one slide?
Oh, sure.
Thank you. The second bullet requiring a field survey for development sites abutting or containing a cemetery. Once that is approved, would that apply only to new administrative site plans, or would they apply to existing plans currently under review?
It would apply to ones that would come in after it's applied. You are vested when you officially submit a plan under the ordinance that you've submitted and under.
Okay, thank you. I apologize for the interruption.
No, that's a good question. Some environmental protection and buffer changes were not really changes, but clarifying how density credits work for areas within regulated floodplain and steep slopes. Right now, you only get partial credit for land in those regulated areas, but state law requires, and we already recognize it in our ordinance, that stream buffers you're allowed to credit. Sorry for the background telephone call. Stream buffers are allowed to be credited for density calculations. And so we constantly have that kind of like, we need to specify in the ordinance how that really works. And areas within floodplain and steep slopes that have stream buffers get that density credit. And then you do the calculations for all those areas outside of the stream buffers. Technical term is riparian buffers, but I'm using generally stream buffers. We've had requests from both planning and the attorney's offices to remove a variance, the require for, there's a certain limit on seeking a variance if you've purchased a property after the date of the ordinance, and it basically makes seeking a variance a lot of times impossible for a stream buffer. And I believe it was once a state requirement, but no longer. And it really can cause it actually can cause some serious legal issues. It's not a variance application should be based upon the merits of the variance application, not when a property is purchased. Just a technical clarification on how we process impervious surface credit transfers, and then also clarifying and making explicit that the project boundary buffers for mass graded sites apply no matter how wide the right of way it's adjacent to. Technical clarification for parking requirements for the compact neighborhood tier when they're adjacent to other tiers. We needed to specify the urban and suburban tier. We do have a compact neighborhood that's adjacent to the downtown tier. So we needed to clarify that provision. And then we have a provision already to exempt parking when you have just a change of use, say, office to retail or something like that. And right now it's at a 20%. If the parking requirement is less than 20%, you don't have to worry about providing additional parking. There's no additional parking required. We constantly talk about reducing parking requirements, and we're still very much in favor of doing that. We've increased the threshold to 50%. We think that helps out small businesses a lot and adapting to changes of vacant commercial spaces. We will probably, through the comprehensive plan, explore further parking reduction initiatives, and there's many jurisdictions throughout the country that don't have minimum parking requirements. So we didn't want to use Omnibus as a way to remove parking requirement altogether. That's a bigger discussion. Lots of people are very concerned about parking, rightly or wrongly, but we felt a 20 to a 50% change was at least worthwhile. Access streets and bike lanes, generally to explicitly allow access through a non-residential use or zoning to serve a residential development. Sometimes there are residential developments that can be served through a driveway that goes through a non-residential site or even an access easement, and we want to provide for that option. We are exploring a payment in lieu option for stub out completion with Public Works and the City Attorney's Office. There are instances, they're not common, but there are instances where it is not feasible or even allowed to complete a stub out to the edge of a development, whether the state Department of Environmental Quality won't allow it for environmental reasons, or there's access issues in getting easements to actually do the construction. So we're exploring that payment in lieu opportunity, and there would be changes that would be needed to the reference guide for development also with that. And that consistent with current design district requirements, just making this kind of bike lanes behind bus stops consistent for throughout Durham, not just design districts. But if you are going to do a new street and we're going to do bike lanes and there's going to be a bus stop there, or you're widening a street and on that side, then it's good to have the bike lane run behind the bus stop and not in front of it.
Michael, can I ask a quick question again? Sorry.
Sure.
First of all, that last bullet's awesome. Second of all, can you remind me what you mean when you say completion of a stub out to the edge of a site?
So when you have a new development that's proposed, and we'll talk, and if pretty much we're talking about residential development, you have your street network within the site and then how it connects to neighboring properties, and stub to neighboring properties that might not be are pending development, like that it might still be rural residential and 50 acres, and there's anticipation that a new development would at some point come in, and then that development would connect to that road network at that stub out. So we're trying to provide connectivity.
The rule change, yeah, but the rule change wouldn't allow developers to choose, right? It would just be if the completion of the stub out is not allowed for some environmental reason or otherwise infeasible.
Correct. It doesn't.
Okay, great. Thank you, Michael.
Yeah. And then for design district.
I'm sorry. Could I ask a follow-up question?
Sure, absolutely.
And residents couldn't be requesting that in a rezoning either, because we get that a lot as well.
No,
And they're
no, it doesn't
upset
change.
because there's connectivity, and so okay.
There
Thank
are some, the ordinance already has specified pretty concrete standards for when a stub out is not to even be provided. If there's already demonstrable, like there's substantial floodplain along the side of one development, no, we're not gonna
Connect.
the ordinance already does that, but
Okay, thank you.
sure. Design districts, we have a rule in there that for for buildings with 1 or 2 dwelling units in them, that that need to also have a non-residential component, except if they are basically at the edge of the design district. They're usually in the S2 sub-district part, that transitional part of a design district that's adjacent to non-design district property. A lot of times RU districts and other maybe other residential districts. We're seeing a lot of requests for more residential throughout S2 and townhome type developments. And the S2 is meant to be a transitional use. So we saw this as a way to not force developments to condoize. And then if they're going to do a townhome development right now, they would just have to condoize their development instead of doing an actual townhouse type development. It doesn't prohibit non-residential uses. It doesn't do that at all. It just expands that to anywhere in the S2 subdistrict. You don't have to meet that kind of mix of use requirement in the building. Additional requirements for requiring on-site service access when providing trash compactors, and allowing for incidental buildings as a public space amenity. We've had calls for, especially on larger development sites where they're providing a lot of public space, to have kind of smaller, for lack of a better term, incidental type buildings that don't really need to meet a building frontage type to serve as small restaurants or walk-up kind of food service or other sales type shops, to be part of that open space or that public space. And we thought that was a reasonable request. And also allow for water reclamation as a provision for additional height. We have height standards in design districts, and then we have abilities to get additional height if you provide additional provisions for your development site. And we have a list of those, and water reclamation was one that was requested to be added. So we have done that. We thought that was reasonable. And then some conformance to state legislation items. There's one regarding manufactured homes and requiring masonry curtain walls or skirting requirements. Actually, legislation to not require them if the land is leased. So we do have masonry and curtain wall skirting requirements in our ordinance. We're not taking that away, but since that state legislation applies to a certain instance, we're just referencing that state law. State legislation also revised how site distance triangle measurements are to be met, standards are to work. So we're revising ours to comply with that. Updating a statutory reference for family care homes. And then also there are some sedimentation erosion control permit and enforcement requirements that are changing based upon recent state law in it too. I tried to capture most of the highlights in this. I'm sure there's a couple in there that I did not mention, but I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. That is all I have. I will stop sharing. And go from there.
Thank you, Michael. I think we went back to, we're still on that, on your presentation,
Okay.
I think.
Stop share. There we go.
Okay, great.
Couldn't find the
Thank you so
button.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, thank you for this very detailed presentation. Omnibus number 17. Let's
Absolutely.
see how many we get up to by the time we we revise our UDO, but to the point that our earlier discussion, that, Planning Commissioner Amendalia raised, is that we know that, these documents are works in progress and are, I think this one especially, I just want to applaud our staff, because when I look at this, I see a lot of response to a lot of the great work that is happening in our community, around infill development and expanding housing choice. And as we do more and more, infill type and adaptive reuses, we're going to find out where things are working or not working. So I do want to applaud staff for being nimble and responsive to issues that have come up. Any comments or questions related to Omnibus 17? Planning Commissioner Amendalia.
Thank you. I have two quick questions. Michael, as you probably have figured out by now, sometimes you bring these to Planning Commission and ask questions that are only semi-related to the specific changes in the change. So there's a change for the affordable housing density bonus in here, which makes sense, seems streamlined. And I'm just curious in general, do we have some data on how that density bonus is performing, and thoughts on how to improve it? And I guess that's actually related to my second question, because you mentioned that like reforming parking requirements may not be appropriate for an omnibus change, which I agree with. Will we see things like that come our way? Is there like a list that planning staff is working on bringing more robust changes through the governing bodies?
To answer your second question first, yes, we always keep that in mind. Parking has actually been on our minds for a very long time. When we do have the resources and more of the policy direction that comes out of the comprehensive plan, I think you're going to see more substantial holistic changes to chunks of the UDO. You're probably going to see new zoning districts. You're going to see revisions to landscaping requirements and to parking requirements. And we staff has always been like, yeah, it's time that we start really thinking about minimum parking requirements and how worthwhile they really are. And there are, as I mentioned before, there are other jurisdictions out there. There's Buffalo, Hartford, those are two that come to mind that have just done away. I think maybe even Asheville, but don't hold me to that one. But that just do away with minimum parking requirements. And Raleigh is working on that too. So this is just a way to kind of, again, do some incremental changes that we think can help, at least in the short term. As for the affordable housing, I know that there are one or two site plans in. It's not well used right now. I have had some talks with community development to see what are different ways of changing it. Our charter that allows us to do this bonus requirement kind of has particularities about it that can limit how flexible we are with or how it works, because it has to provide a certain amount of affordable housing units and and stipulates what those look like. But a lot of times we're seeing more coming through now through rezoning applications, or we've actually had a couple pre-submittal conferences, not using the affordable housing bonus, but going to be using the development agreement strategy to allow for different ways of providing affordable housing that might not meet the specific charter or bonus requirements. Because of the way they're funding it. Sometimes the LIHTC, the low-income housing tax credits have particularities about it that don't play well with zoning a lot of times or our policies. So we have to navigate that too. But it's a good question. We do try to stay on top of that.
That's helpful. Yeah, I think it would be useful to have some type of report on the performance of the density bonus at some point, but I appreciate that update.
Sure.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you, Austin. And you took one of my questions, and I think that's a great suggestion, is looking at some of our incentives around affordable housing. Are they working? Are they not? And what are some other best practices out there nationally or even internationally that are working, or that the development, especially our local community-oriented developers, what are things that suggestions they may have? Any other comments or questions? Councilmember Caballero.
I just really want to emphasize the parking rules, especially knowing that Raleigh is now moving too. And I feel all kinds of ways when Raleigh starts to do things better than we do, as do many of us in this, in the Zoom probably. So I can see the point from planning staff. I just hope that we do it sooner than later. And it's the thing that I hear about often from our small development community in particular, who is quickly getting priced out of being able to do development. And I fundamentally believe we get better development when it's folks who live here and have to face their neighbors in the community for decisions that they make.
Well, I mean, that's something, feedback that we can get, actual direction on now in terms of at least the change of use requirement. So, maybe not doing a holistic blanket, no more minimum parking requirements, but for instances, what we're talking about now about change of use, if there's a direction from JCCPC that says, you know what, we're cool with just not making people go through site plans if they have to do more parking, we'll let people off the hook on that. Then if that's something that you want us to really consider as part of this omnibus, we'll go ahead and do it and talk about it. Give us that direction, because that's part of bringing it to JCCPC to get that feedback and commentary and say, hey, we're comfortable with you moving a little bit more on this one or something like that. Or you're not comfortable with something, that too. But if you're comfortable with saying, you know what, when it's an existing building, there's no other work being done and they don't have enough parking because of whatever reason, it was built back in 1950 or 60 and, whatever. And we're fine with them not having to worry about parking, just move on in. There it is. Let us know, give us that feedback. I see you are.
I'm ready to go there. Yeah, I'm only one.
Yeah.
I'm like, move. Yes, definitely. Right. I'm not sure where everybody else is, but.
Is that good, Michael? Did you get enough thumbs up on that?
I get a thumbs up. I mean, this is going to be more of a city issue than a kind of a unincorporated county issue, because of obviously the urban environment of the city and the existing development. But if council, if JCCPC and the council members in particular are saying, yep, don't stop at 50%, go higher, go just a blanket, don't require it, we'll move that forward.
I'm comfortable with that.
And the county, we do own property in the city. So just so you know, we have vested interest.
That's true. I mean, we are parking requirements in downtown. And we have very limited parking requirements in those areas that are compact neighborhoods. If you're looking at the urban tier areas, those neighborhoods around downtown, and then obviously in the suburban tier areas, those are the two big areas that you're going to.
But that's where we're seeing a lot of our infill, and we're really
Yes.
creative. And it's also the cost of land is so high there. So if we can offset some of these other things, then it's a benefit.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, I'll put that down. We'll move forward with that. obviously we'll discuss it internally to make sure I don't want to speak for my director, but we're hearing the direction you're giving, and I'm getting a thumbs up from Sarah. So there it is. 100% move it forward. Done.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Caballero. Any other comments? So I have a few questions. Could you talk a little bit more about the section 4.8, the navigation easement, the airport overlay? Could you just talk a little bit more about what is that going to mean for residents? So if there's going to be easements for free and obstructive overflight of subject area, I just want to try to understand again what it means for residents. And I'm thinking about not just existing neighborhoods, but future areas that could be developed around the airport. And is there a way that people can be notified, for instance, when a subdivision or whatever, something's being developed, that realtors or whatever people have to be notified? You live in a navigation easement areas, because that's where we get into I think the issues when people complain about the noise from there. So could you talk a little bit about that?
The airport overlays already require that notification. So it's required for new developments to pass along the information that they're in an airport overlay, they are, and what that means. And the navigation easement provides, I believe, I'm not an expert on it, some legal protection for RDU if flight patterns do have to change or increase or whatever. But the concerns that you raised are already built into that overlay area, and it only applies to those properties within the overlay, which is just a very limited amount of area nearby, or not right nearby, but near RDU.
Okay, and are there any requirements related to building codes when you are in that easement area? Just
Sarah's shaking her head, so I'll let her tackle that one.
Sure.
Yeah, a couple of things. This is just in full disclosure. I've lived in the airport overlay for 27 years in various different houses. So every time I've bought and sold 3 houses and had to sign on the dotted line an acknowledgement at closing, that is part of the closing paperwork, that you're accepting that you're in this overlay and that there will be impacts, et cetera. So I know for a fact that is something that absolutely happens. Our ordinance does require sound attenuation to a certain decibel level, and we do require certifications from our builders that the structures are built to that level. So it's a conversation we have. Just so you all know, we are having regular meetings with the airport authority as they look at potential changes to their flight paths, et cetera. And we are evaluating like what changes may need to happen in the future, because the airport has said that, as this area in general is getting more populated, they're getting more complaints, obviously. And so they're sensitive to that. We're sensitive to that. Maybe I'm a little less sensitive because I'm just used to it, but that is something that we're working through. But I wanted everyone to know that, yes, we do have measures in place, both in terms of building construction and in terms of notice to property owners, that kind of what they're getting themselves into.
Yeah, and it's all built into, thank you, Sarah, because I completely forgot about those additional prescribed building methods, but they're built into the airport overlay regulations already.
Okay, great. And I mean, I guess even when we look at our future place type map, being sensitive to what, as the airport grows, there could be, like you said, other impacts. And I think we just need to be balancing. I mean, it's in everyone's interest, right, to know who can be impacted and how we try to, deal with that impact, like with construction practices or whatever. Yeah. Okay. All right. Thank you. And my other question was related to what Commissioner Amadalia brought up. Our whole list of density or height bonuses. And I mean, I fully support the water reclamation. I'd be really curious to see, at some point to get a report. Does anybody use the density bonus, the height bonus? Do any of these bonuses, are they being used? How effective are they? Kind of what we're doing with the expanding housing choice too. Did you all consider, as we are both implementing our environmental zero carbon emissions goals and our plans, the city and the county, did you all look at anything tied to that as well, like people putting solar panels on the tops of buildings as being something else that we may want to incentivize?
We can. I don't remember in the past if we had discussed those. We did the design district updates. Oh gosh, Sarah, what was that? Back in, 4 years ago when we went through those major updates. And so these provisions were born out of those updates. And water reclamation was the one that was brought specifically to us recently. And we felt it was reasonable. And I was like, okay, let's put it in Omnibus. I can't remember, and maybe Sarah does remember, but I don't remember any specifics about solar panels in particular, but we're amenable to providing that. We do already have green roof standards in there for provisions and stormwater capture and reuse. So there are other green infrastructure options built into the provisions. And I'm going through the list right now to see if I'm maybe overlooking something, but solar panels in particular are not, but I think it's something we can consider. And we could add it in. And if it's something that's really, again, like we talked about the parking, if it's something you really want to see, as you as JCCPC is reviewing this, hey, while you're doing water reclamation, let's think about solar panels or something along those lines. Maybe not, I don't want to focus on solar panels, but something along that lines of energy efficiency, demonstrable energy efficiency via solar panels or some other mechanism. That's something we can talk about further and see what we can move forward with this before we initiate the adoption process to Planning Commission.
I will also chime in and just say that, remember, these are in design districts, so like predominantly downtown and 9th Street. And we do see a lot of folks using these particular bonuses, way more than the affordable housing bonus. So these are very popular. They're a way that, these by right developments in our design districts can go higher. But I will be honest and say that we're getting a lot more complaints about our by right development, even in downtown, and the kind of height and size and intensity of those. So I think that just being conscientious that whatever the trade-off is should be something that we really want. So that again would be direction that we would look for from you all.
Well, I personally would support looking at solar panels because I think there's an urgency, we all know, related to climate change, and also would be consistent with both what the city and county renewable energy plans. So I think this is something we do want to really encourage. But so for me, that would definitely be a priority. And I would love to hear from other planning commissioners, joint city county planning commissioners on it. Charlie?
Thank you, Chair Jacobs. Sarah, are you saying that when you talk about complaints, are you talking about the fact that folks are complaining, that developers are complaining it's too hard to build by right downtown? Or are you saying that community members are complaining that there's too much density and height downtown?
The latter, community members complaining. Yep.
Okay. I mean,
Just sharing.
I mean, I've heard some of that. I've seen some of that on Twitter and social media, kvetching about this new building or that new building. But I think, you know, ultimately those of us who care about sustainability have to understand that no matter what our personal design preferences might be, about how nice looking a particular building is, or that kind of stuff, I think ultimately we're going to have to develop more densely close to our transit centers, close to transit lines, and there's no bigger transit center in Durham than downtown. So, you know, I guess I don't have a ton of patience for those types of complaints. I think they, in any event. So I am. I guess my only question is, how feasible is it that like a new 15 or 20 story tower in downtown Durham would have solar panels, and to what extent that would be meaningful? But I know there are other. I think, Michael, you were very clever in saying let's take it a step back from solar panels and just talk about other things that make buildings more efficient or that use renewable energy sources, and let developers be more creative about how they do that. That's my own personal opinion.
Councilmember Caballero, and I just want to echo what you just said, Councilmember Reese. I agree. If we're not going to put density downtown, I don't know where we're going to put it. That's the appropriate place for it. But go ahead, Councilmember Caballero.
I just wanted to say I agree, and I actually appreciate Michael's suggestion about making it a little bit broader and not just solar panel specific, and because it might not be the tool that is going to get you some efficiency, but there's other things that you could do that will.
Yeah, that sounds
and also
great.
The ship sailed on, you know, the upzoning of downtown like long ago. So.
Thank you. Planning Commissioner Medaglia.
Yeah, I just wanted to quickly express support for adding in more of these green building standards to this omnibus.
Okay, sounds good. So we're going to leave it open to you all to look at how you want to address environmental sustainability, renewable energy, green building, whatever, what would be most appropriate.
And for clarification, this is applicable to all the design districts, correct? Not just downtown.
Yeah, there's provisions for the downtown design districts and for the CD design district, which is 9th Street.
Patterson Place.
I'll have to double check for the CSD one, which is over Patterson Place.
Okay.
I don't think it has the same kind of provision standards, but I'll double check.
Okay. And again, not to just, I know this isn't the right process, but I want to name that these are the conversations that I hope we have sooner than later in general around where all of these, I want to incentivize this everywhere. I understand it's good to start in focused areas like our design districts, but if we're going to get real about climate change and our goals as a city and county, that, you know, inefficient building and energy use is a huge, it's one of the places we can get some of the best benefit besides transit.
Great point. Thank you.
Yeah, just real quick to say, obviously we can't, maybe it's not obvious, but we can't mandate that new construction include some of these types of facilities like solar panels, but we can certainly, we should certainly be doing everything we can to incentivize it, as Councilmember Caballero said. And I think that's a longer term goal that I have for the comprehensive plan, is to incentivize that wherever we can. But I agree, this is a good place.
Thank you.
Right. Great points. Thank you. Okay, so we are going to move on from this item that we've given you all some some direction and
Thank you very
move on.
much.
Thank you so much. And we're going to move on to update report on expanding housing choices from Scott Whiteman.
Morning, commissioners. I'm glad to be back. Right, this is your, I don't know, what do we call 3 times a year? Not quarterly, but this is your regular update on the expanding housing choice metrics, including the third quarter of 2021. So this is a table that shows, which is also in your memo, it shows all the EHC enabled permits that we've received to date from its effective date in October of 2019. We have had a total of 194 so far over, that's almost exactly 2 years. We had 37 last quarter. They were all either the small lot option, which seems to be one of the more popular EHC options, and accessory units. Here, this table is also in your memo. Just as you might expect, most of the permits are in the urban tier, which is where we generally targeted the EHC changes. And I apologize. We the data I used to make this map wasn't working, so I wasn't able to update it for this quarter. So this is the map I showed in August, but I did look up the addresses of the permits from this last quarter. We're seeing the small lot options. A lot of them are kind of showing up on the kind of the eastern edge of the urban tier, kind of from Roxborough up to Roxborough, kind of a semicircle, where the lots tend to be a little bit larger than they are in central Durham. And the ADUs are still, they're dispersed pretty well, but there's definitely a clustering around the downtown and Duke neighborhoods, particularly their Trinity Park, as you can see from last time, the map from last time. There's continue to be a lot being built in Trinity Park. We'll work with GIS to get this map fixed for the next time, so we can update that. So here's the table showing teardowns going back to 2008. It's actually continued to trend down slightly. Looks like we're on pace for about 75 this year. So it's still, for whatever reason, 2019 was our teardown peak. So, and here's some late breaking new data that we were able to get from our friends in GIS. They used our sales data that our Register of Deeds and tax office has to determine the average single family sales price. Started going back to the oldest data we have is from 1997. So this first table shows the sales price of a single family home in Durham, which has gone from about 130,000 up to 360,000 over that time period. You can see it's a relatively steady climb with some weird spike in 2015 I can't explain. And this one just shows the last 5 years to kind of give a better baseline of whether or not EHC had any effects. It's obviously don't have enough data to say whether or not it did have effects, but it does seem to be a relatively just steady climb higher. And just for reference, these are county-wide. It's not any specific area in Durham. So we also were able to isolate the average price per acre. So this is all properties that have been sold during this time, not the average of all properties. So it doesn't differentiate whether it was a vacant property or if it had a building on it. So that has steadily climbed as well, with another weird spike in 2015. it actually went down last year for oddly. So from a little under 500,000 to about 2.5 million for that time period. Here, this is the data for the last 5 years as well for the average price per acre. It also went up steadily and then went down last year slightly. As I think I mentioned before, it's hard without doing really detailed statistical analysis to figure out whether the expanding housing choice in particular had any effects on these. But I think generally what it shows is that prices, as we know, for houses are going up steadily and have been for many years. So that is the end of the presentation. I will say, now that we've able to figure out how to manipulate that data, we can provide some more detailed data if you all want, particularly based on location. So if there's any particular part of town you're interested in sales data, we can provide that for the next meeting. If just let us know what kind of things you're looking for. So I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Scott. Yeah, looking at some of that additional information is really interesting. And looking at the trends since 2008 and then the last 5 years is really helpful. And just to clarify, the two additional metrics that you're going to start including are the land sale price per square foot and the value per unit type. Is that correct in the future reports?
That's right. But what we found is the sales of single family houses, there are thousands of those and there are very few of other housing types. So it was isolating it by two single family and two family wasn't creating a great comparison. So that's why we just included the single family. And we will do those just with the caveat that data is only updated once a year by the tax office. So it would have to be, it'd probably be the August one on a normal basis is when that data is finalized.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Okay. Any comments or questions from committee members? Planning Commissioner Amendalia.
Thank you. And thanks, Scott, for this report. It's really useful to have this data and to know that we have this data. So you mentioned looking at specific geographies. I think for starters, to me, it would be helpful. I know this takes a lot of processing power, but I think it would be helpful to just have like an overall map of Durham so you can get like a high level view on price points throughout the county. And I think that would be to me, that would be a good initial guide for them zooming into different neighborhoods. Secondly, let me go this way first. Can members of the public access this sales data, request the sales data if they are versed in data analysis and want to understand what's happening?
Yeah, so this is all based on public data that comes from the county tax office. So it's all available. And we've already done the analysis to get to this point, so that it's not original research, so we can do that. It's if someone in the general public was asking for general research, there's limitations on that, but the data itself is public, and any analysis we've done with it is also public.
That's helpful. When it comes to the data that we have, can we look at like housing age, and the size of structures, particularly broken down along like single family, duplex, triplex lines, so that we can get a sense of like our existing housing stock, and are we seeing new duplexes, or are all of our duplexes built before 1980, whatever trends we can see there?
I don't know for sure that we can do that, but I'll look. I know we have some of that data, but how much of it we have and how accurate it is and how up to date it is, I don't know. So I'll look into that.
Okay. Great. Yeah, I love looking at data and sales data, so I could get really nerdy about this, but I appreciate the update and I'm excited to see some findings coming from this.
Thank you. Councilmember Reese.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Scott, I did. Do we have this presentation anywhere, or do we just have the kind of the memo about it?
You don't have the present. After we do this, we post it on. We have a website that we posted on. We can send it to you all as well.
Great. Can you go back and show us the that data, the price per acre, I think it was, that showed that unusual decline over the last year? Trying to think through what signal that is giving us about the housing market, and rather than me try to invent the wheel on the fly, maybe you guys have some thoughts about what that means. Could it mean that we're densifying a bit more? I don't know. I got nothing. Maybe you got something.
Yeah, so I'll say we got this data very, very recently, so I haven't dug into it a whole lot, but want to make sure that we gave you what we got. I think one bit of educated speculation I have is we are kind of the increase we've seen in suburban development, kind of on the fringe. Maybe people are buying a lot more large sites that are vacant, which are going to cost less per acre than a fully developable site in downtown or in one of the near neighborhoods that's, you know, 1/8 of an acre. But we can see if we can figure out if there's any trends in there and let you all know at your next meeting. I mean, it's curious because everything that it looks like outside the windows is that everything is going up. So I was surprised to see that as well.
Yeah, I guess if it's not a data problem, and assuming that it's not for a moment, I think it's a signal of something that I don't understand, and I'd like to know more about it. I don't know how we get there, but that's the one thing that struck me. That and the continuing decline of teardowns is pretty, I guess, remarkable is the word I would use, especially given where we were 2 years ago. Again, you know, you like to think that policy changes are responsible for changes that we see at that level, but I think that can be kind of we all tend to look at data, and when we analyze for trends, we tend to reinforce our prior assumptions. And so maybe it's not a great idea for policymakers to be trying to understand the connections between the policy choices that we have made and the policy outcomes that we wanted to see when we made the policy changes. But I do think it's interesting that one of the things we were trying to do. Anyway, I just think that's interesting, and would hope we can figure out why those new choices are being made, if the pandemic has impacted that at all, and made certain choices more attractive, if you know, supply pricing, if labor market changes. I don't know, but I think that's also interesting. So those are the two things I noticed. So thanks, Scott. Again, I agree with Commissioner Almondali. It's really great to see this data and have it, and to be able to see it over time is going to be even more interesting.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember Reese. I can't see anyone right now, but anyone else have any other questions?
Yes, I have a follow-up based off of Councilmember Reese's questions. This data that we're looking at, is this based off of new construction, rehabs, or everything?
It's everything. Oh, so
Okay.
the data, the price per acre and the price of sales, is those the two you're asking about? Yeah, those are based on everything that's sold in Durham County. The EHC metrics are based on new permits.
Okay, so for that sales data, one theory that might be helpful to test is, are more people pursuing rehabs right now? And so you see a decline in price per acre because those older units are priced lower. They might be on different lot sizes than what we're seeing for new construction. And then what might be interesting to see is that a sign of people starting to flip older properties? Just kind of brainstorming off of that. But with that in mind, I would be interested to see the difference in new construction and rehab units, because you can start to look at potential neighborhood trends of people flipping houses. And my assumption is with the sales data, it has historic sales of similar properties. So you can look at like, did a house get bought and sold within a 6 month to a year period, to see like, and if there was a price increase, particularly like that could be a sign of flipping. I know some counties, as they input sales data, will kind of create a flag on like whether or not they think it is a flip. And I think that could be something helpful. I know that's like the tax assessor's office, that's not you, but as you're working with them on this data to understand it, that might be something helpful to relay to them to start flagging for the future. I had one more thought. I can't remember. That's all for now.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Caballero.
Thank you. Commissioner Amendolia, can you go back to your first? I'm just trying to understand what you're saying. The price per acre. I guess this is a lending question. If folks, this isn't about flipping. This is about the market being so tight that folks are actually not moving, and so then they're going through construction loans and remodeling instead of buying. And so now I'm curious, would that then impact? Because that's not going to get measured in the same way as a per acre. Okay. So now I'm curious about that. And I didn't know if that's what you were talking about at first too. You were doing it in the context of house flipping. I'm just doing it in the context of folks you can't actually move in Durham right now.
If it were just someone doing remodels or to an existing property, it's not going to show up in either one of those.
It's not going to show up, right? Okay. And if your housing market is so tight, traditionally folks buy, historically, maybe you bought a starter home, then you were able to move up in the housing market as your own income increased. And I would say in Durham currently, that is not the trajectory that many longtime residents are facing. They're having to either put up with smaller homes or work with what they've got versus moving into a bigger home. And so then it makes me curious that then it wouldn't impact the trends potentially.
For example, if you've got 3 kids at home, you bought your house when they were smaller, they're getting older, becoming teenagers, and you have to look at ridiculous scenarios about expanding your current home, perhaps into a floodplain, that kind of thing. Is that what you're talking about, Councilmember?
Yeah, and you can't afford anything in city Durham right now. No.
None of us might be talking about our own personal experience,
or a whole business because of that.
Right. These are all really great questions and points that people are bringing up. And I guess one, I know that we keep asking our planning staff to do more and more things for us. So I would just, and I know that you all are already, stretched to the max. So I guess one thought I had is perhaps this may be, some of these ideas may be good for our graduate students at NCCU or UNC. We get, I know I have professors reaching out to me all the time who are looking for projects for their students to do. And, some of these may be great kind of small area studies. For instance, one of the big concerns has been our historic neighborhoods, our downtown neighborhoods. So maybe just even, looking at some defined census tracts to really understand what is happening with prices, with tear downs, with whether people are remodeling versus flipping, all of those things. It seems like that kind of granular analysis, which we're all trying to grasping for may be a great project for some of our university students. And I know that, the reason that we're even tracking this data in the first place was because when we did the expanding housing choice, there were a lot of concerns that we heard, okay, is this going to cause all these tear downs? Is this going to cause price escalation? Are we going to get the results that we really want, which is to create, this wasn't an affordable housing plan. This was really expanding housing choices that are hopefully going to help within that dynamic of our, affordable housing challenges. So just to clarify, but it may be we're at a point now, because it's been, how many years has it been that
It was,
we've
2 years, a little
Yeah,
2 years and a couple months.
so it's really very early on, right? But just I'm just throwing that out there. This might be something good if you all feel like you don't have the staff capacity to do some of the things we're looking at. And I think, so the first year where we saw the most tear downs was 2019, right? So that was the first year.
It was, but it was only effective for the last quarter of that year. So
Okay.
it's,
Yeah.
I can't prove it, but I don't think all 147 happened in the last quarter.
Right. Okay. But certainly the trends are showing that now, it's much more looking since 2008. We're not seeing anything really as a big outlier with that. Okay. All right. Well, and also I was going to suggest just even bringing in some of the Durham the Realtors Association. They may have some insights as well, because certainly like your theory, Scott, the larger, the larger, a land purchase, then the lower the price per acre, obviously. So, maybe the realtors can also help with some of those, where some of the trends. But, you city council members, you're the ones who are getting all the rezoning, so that as well. So, yeah. And the planning commission. All right. Well, thank you so much for this great update. We really appreciate this work. And I think also as we look forward, Planning Commissioner Amadalia brought up one other possible area for data tracking. I think when we look to the future, you all may have suggestions for us, Scott and Sarah and Michael and Lisa, of what are the things that we're going to want to really track when we have our new comp plan and our new ordinances. What will be some key performance measures that you all as a department think are going to be important for us to track, to know, are we implementing our vision? Are we, how are we doing? And you all may need staff for that as well. So just want to put that out there. And we're going to move on now to a census update, which is with you as well, Scott.
This will be really quick. We just learned yesterday that the Census Bureau has announced that they will be releasing the bulk of their data, all the good stuff. They said in 2022, no month or quarter or season or anything. So sometime between January 1st and December 31st, we expect to see the census data.
Speaking of data.
So I would hope for a little more guidance than that, but that's the best we got at the moment. So we'll keep this on the agenda every other month, and we'll let you know when we have something better.
Thank you. Any questions for Scott on that? Yes, Austin.
Just real quick. I think I heard that there is no 2020 American Community Survey. Is that correct? And B, how does that impact the planning department?
See, yeah, so I've heard the same as well. It's all wrapped up in whatever delays are caused by the Census Bureau and possibly the previous administration. So, I mean, census data is really important for planning, as you know, and the ACS data is the most up to date. Luckily, we'll have the decennial data sometime soonish, which is the best data. So I think that kind of makes up for not having the 2020 ACS a little bit. But even the ACS data tends to lag by a couple of years, and it's really hard to keep up with a fast-growing, fast-changing community like ours. So it's kind of what's happening at the Census Bureau is generally disappointing.
All right. And last, we have gonna have a discussion with Sarah about reports.
So as you all know, it has been our practice to have our boards and commissions bring their annual reports to JCCPC first before they move on to the governing body agendas. We recently received some communication from the city clerk about wanting to get all board and commission annual reports on the city side to a city council meeting in January. And as you all know, since you don't meet in January, you meet in February, probably the best case we could do is, maybe early March or late February, if we were to come to you all first. The practice of bringing them here first is not required by the interlocal agreement or anything else. It has just been a practice. I think it was a way to give maybe a slightly more intimate, less intimidating way to give some of our board chairs the ability to share with the smaller group their report. But I wanted to bring that to you all's attention to see, is that a practice that you would like to continue? I know that I think on the county side in general, they end up afterwards just going on their consent agenda. On the city, they also go on consent afterwards. Sometimes there are some follow-up presentations at work sessions, sometimes not. So it kind of varies. So I just wanted to throw that out for you all. If you all want to retain bringing them before this body, that's perfectly fine. I will need to coordinate with particularly the city clerk's office and let them know why we will not be able to meet their requested deadline. And I think that deadline comes from the city's board and commissions manual, which does not necessarily, I think, recognize city county boards and the interlocals for those boards that are a little different. Most of our interlocals actually have an April deadline for annual reports, not a January deadline. But so I'll stop talking and would like to hear what you all's opinion on this is.
Thank you, Sarah. And we discussed this with the Vice Chair Middleton yesterday at our planning meeting. I think there are two issues. One is we need to get to an agreement between the city and the county on an agreed upon schedule for these reports, because it seems like there's a bunch of different assumptions or standards at play here. And obviously we've got a number of joint city and county commissions, and so we all need to be on the same page for that. So I would suggest, and I don't know who's appropriate to do this, but to just bring this issue to the attention of the city and county managers. And I don't know, maybe Don and Brian, you can help with this too, as our legal reps here, but just to get this on everyone's radar so that we can get to an agreement on a schedule between the city and county, because we don't want to make things harder for anyone. We want to make things easier. And you're kind of in the middle, you, Sarah, with this issue. So that's one suggestion. And then the second, I think it's important, and I want to hear from the rest of the committee members. My main goal with these boards and commission reports is that we give folks the attention and the support and the recognition that they're due. And that if we don't have the reports here, that we don't just put them on consent, but we really give folks the opportunity to present like they do when they come here. Because we have so many people who are volunteering their time and work so hard and do such important work. And I just want to make sure that they get the recognition and time that they deserve. So I'll stop here and just let everybody else weigh in on these issues. Councilmember Reese.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Are we only talking about joint city-county boards? Okay. And how many of those are there that normally go through this process here at JCCPC?
So the boards that come here, we have the Appearance Commission, we have the Durham Open Space and Trails Commission, the Historic Preservation Commission, the Board of Adjustment, and the Planning Commission. So there are 5 boards that come to you all.
What about BPAC?
BPAC does not, because that's not staffed through the planning department anymore.
Okay.
It's been, I don't know, probably maybe 15 years or so. That is staffed by transportation. And so it does not come to JCCPC. That one goes directly to the governing bodies.
That's right. That's why I was like, some of these come straight to us and now I'm confused. Yeah. Okay.
So is the issue that if they didn't come to JCCPC, that those boards would feel compelled to go to both of the elected boards, and that's why they route through us?
To be completely honest, I'm not 100% sure why they route to you all. It has been the practice, I think, as long as I've been here. But I believe it was started as just a way, because I think the majority of folks do not go to governing bodies and present. And I think it was a way to give them an opportunity to do that in a smaller, less stressful kind of environment. But again, the main advantage, I think, of not coming here is just timing. It does save several months of timing so that the governing bodies would get them earlier in the year as opposed to in the spring. And the question is whether that's an important issue to you all or not.
Well, my recommendation would be that we let the chair and vice chair work with you and the city county manager to figure out a system that y'all think will work best and serve all the various competing interests. And I'm 99% certain I will agree with whatever y'all come up with.
Thank you. Any other feedback?
I think my only thought would be that because I don't serve on the other boards that would get the chance to receive these reports, it would be helpful for me if it were able to come through JCCPC so I can see how these cross-cutting committees fit into the planning commission's work and see what they're doing. But I also am not primarily responsible for managing all of that, so we'll defer to what works best to y'all.
Great point. Thank you. Anyone else have any thoughts on this issue?
I like Councilmember Reese's idea.
Okay.
I would concur, and I honestly, I know that we're switching chair and vice chair. Since Mark is not here, I would just rather wait. I know you said you discussed it with him, but I would just love to hear his thoughts. So I concur also with what Councilmember Reese said.
Sounds good. Well, we'll continue then. We did discuss it yesterday, Sarah and Councilmember Middleton and I, but we will, it sounds like this, we're being asked to just follow up on this in terms of leadership and staff. And so we will do that and then report back to the full committee. But I think that's an important point that you brought up, Planning Commissioner Medallia. Honestly, we didn't discuss that yesterday. The fact that if it doesn't come here, then you don't have a chance to weigh in, or the Planning Commission doesn't get included in that. And so these committees do not report to the Planning Commission, is that correct? The reports don't come to the Planning Commission. Okay. All right, thank you for raising that. Okay, so that brings us to the end of our meeting today. And to Commissioner Burns' point, we will be voting at our February meeting. It's a little awkward because we meet, every 2 months. I actually thought it was this meeting that we were voting on leadership, but that will be at our February meeting. So I want to wish everyone a wonderful, safe, and healthy holiday, and see everybody back in a few months next year.
Hi, everybody. Happy
Okay.
holidays. See you next year.
Bye-bye.